Hello guys, and today I'm going to be making a Python tutorial. So this is a series I've been thinking of making for a while because not only am I using Python a lot more now, but it's just a very good language to know how to use, and I thought it's a good start for this channel, you know, to hopefully help some people out with Python. So today, as you can probably see, I will be teaching guys the first and most important thing about Python, or any programming language for that matter, variables and data types. So I'm going to get this done as quick as possible because these are the probably two most important things to know in programming in general, and they're not exactly too interesting, but you'll already start to see they allow you to do quite a bit. They're used in literally everything, like no matter what, so you need to know how to use these, but luckily they're pretty easy to understand. So let's get on to variables. So variables are essentially just containers. You can just think of them as containers for pieces of data. And like, I guess a way of thinking of it would be like a box with a label, essentially. So I'm just going to demonstrate here. So if I put here a name, so this here is the name of my container, and this is the data. And I can do this with other pieces of data as well. So say you want to write down age. So now this container called age is equal to this value, and what you can do with that is do some cool things like this. This is called a print value. Not a print value, this is the print function. So it allows you to essentially just print when it's, well, you'll see what it does in a minute, but essentially when it's ran, it just writes whatever's on inside the print function. So say I put hello, as you can see, I've ran the code and it's put hello world in here. That's a print function. Really simple and easy to understand. You just have to put it inside two brackets and make sure you have the speech bubbles. You have to use that all the time with any like written words in Python, and I'll get to that in a minute when I talk about data types. But what's cool about variables is that you can do this. So this is, remember what I'm doing here. So put F before the speech bubbles. Every time you write this, put F before the speech bubbles, and then inside, wherever you want to put your variable, so my name is, you see how this works. So I've now just inserted this variable into this print function. So now when I run it, guess what will happen? My name is Reese, because this is equal to this. And I can do it another one where I can say I am, and make sure you put an F before the speech bubbles. So make sure to do this every time you want to put a variable in, you put an F before you start it. And then you put the curly brackets where you want to put the variable. So years old. See? So as you can tell, it's filled in the gaps. So now you can change this value to, say, Sam. And now, look, it's changed. see how it's already becoming quite useful. So you can put he's Sam and he is 20 years old. So you can kind of already see how useful it is to have these containers so you can easily manipulate data, which is why they're so vital to learn early on. And now I'm going to kind of show you the different data types. So I've already used two here. I wonder if you can guess what they are. You probably can. But, so, I'm going to explain it now. So, this is what we call a string. It's essentially written words. And that's literally what it is. It's just dialogue, essentially. Now, Python's different to other languages. In other languages, you'd have to do this. So you'd have to write string and then the name of the variable. So you'd have to write this and then variable name here. So that's not part of the name. So you'd have to declare what data type it is before typing out the rest. However, in Python, Python's what we call a dynamically typed language, which means we do not have to declare a data type at all, which is really useful. It basically means Python kind of just guesses what data type we're using based on what we've done. Since we put speech marks here and words, it assumes, right, he's using a string. And that becomes really useful for certain things like converting data types later on. And this down here, age, is what we call an integer. Now, you just call it a number, but that's what we call numbers in programming, is an integer. And as you can tell, look, an integer. Class int. So yeah. And then, like I said earlier, in other programming languages, you'd normally have to do this and put int and then the variable name. But you don't have to do that. I'm going to show you two more data types. There are four main data types you should be focusing on as a beginner, but I will just show you those. Now, this one's kind of like an integer, but I'm sure you'll be able to guess the difference. Equals. Oh, that's just no, wrong thing. Equals 1 point. Now, can you spot the difference between this and this? You can probably guess it. Yeah. So this has a decimal place. That's the main difference. This is what we call a float. And so you'd put, in other coding languages, you'd put that, but obviously you don't need to. But what you've got to understand, anything with a decimal place is referred to as a float. So if I was to, I don't know if it'll show us the definition. Let me just check. Yeah. So as you can tell, look, it said this is what we call a float. So that's used for any decimal values, which is also quite useful. It's quite useful to differentiate the two, although in Python what you've got to remember is that you might get confused because they're both numbers. You do kind of get mixed up because you don't explicitly say whether they're float or integer or not, because obviously you don't need to in Python, so it's quite hard to read. Now here's the last one that I think early on a lot of people forget to use, but it is much more useful than it seems. So I'll just say is, just trying to think of one. What do I use for this? Alright, I'm just going to call it is sleeping. Say you want to track if someone is sleeping. True. I think you can see the point now. So this is what we call a boolean. So it can either be true or false. As you can see, it is currently Oh yeah, make sure you use a capital letter as well, because that's very important. But as you can tell, that is what we call a bool or a boolean, the proper name for it. But essentially, those will be true or false values, 1 or 0, essentially. These are a lot more useful than they might seem. They are. I think early on you might not think they're as useful because you don't use them as much in earlier projects, but I will say they are very useful, much more useful than you'd think. But yeah, these are the 4 data types, and now I'm going to go on to this one here to show you some examples that I've written out. So, as you can tell, you can already kind of start to see how useful these are. So you've got A and B, you add them together, put them in sum, and now this is a different method of implementing the variables inside a print function. Now, I don't want you to think about this. I did this earlier, and then realising, oh wait, they should probably know the other one because it's much better. Yeah. Essentially, as you can tell, do it like this instead, but you can do it like that, where you just put a comma next to the speech bubble. However, a lot of people don't really use that anymore. They're starting to use this one a lot more, so I just suggest to make sure you use this from now on, because I'm going to be using it throughout this, I guess, course or series. But as you can tell, I think you can start to see how this works. So these get tight. So this here is actually multiplying. So we use this. It should be Shift 8. We use Shift 8 for any multiplication. So just remember that. You shouldn't need to remember it too much. I will be going over those in another video, but the point is just quickly remember that that is multiplying. But you can already kind of start to see how this is really useful. Now, this is interesting. You can actually add 2 strings together to create, you know, a string of sentences that kind of rhymed. But the point is, you can create bigger sentences by like attaching strings together, as you can tell. And if I was to run this in a minute, you'd see that, so I will. But here's just a boolean: is adult true, is adult question mark true. So as you can tell, it will tell you, and you can already say I've put the outputs. These should be the outputs, and you'll see in a minute these are what we get. So sum is 30, the area is 11.0, full name is John Doe, and is adult is true. So I think you can already start to see how useful these are and why they are literally the foundations of this language, and every language for that matter. But yeah, I thought I'd quickly go over these. That's pretty much going to be it for today. Next one I'm going to be talking about is functions and inputs, user inputs, because those will allow you to do a lot of different things in Python, and it's going to be quite fun, I think. So after that we'll do a project as well, because I think they're a very good way of learning how to use Python, because I think the true way of improving is by doing some projects. But yes, next video, functions and inputs. But I hope you liked this, and if you did, you know what to do. Like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video, and hopefully you enjoyed this. Bye.